So, my friends, David's already been scared off. I will just have us sit and breathe for a moment as more people come and gather, and then Pavel will be here shortly. And in the meantime, I'll just start with some music. Yes, here we are. There's an expression, as far as I know, it comes from Africa, is Ashe, which I think is quite appropriate for this moment. And it is also to give thanks to our framing. David, the flute is from Indonesia. It is a bamboo flute. Um, so I think we can begin then. So welcome here. We are already in the flow and in process. And just to Pavel is going to be, he's sends his apologies. He's dealing with a very serious situation, but apparently he will be okay and he will be here in a moment. And I just want to also say hi to Marina, who is here, part of the Living Cities Earth community, but not only part. I say she's, in a flock of geese, it's called a spear of geese when they fly. She's the one in the front. So, so Marina, thank you so much. It looks like you're here just providing technical support, but you are so much embodying Living Cities Earth. So thank you so much for being with us. And Marina indeed also is part of the creation of the Learning Gaia Talk series. So one of the co-holders together with Pavel and me, and there's just a few others. And good to see you here, Cindy, Cynthia, CD. It goes by many things right there in your name. So that's good. And it looks like you're there with brilliance. Look at that. I love your background. Very nice. And Robert, just saw you just moments ago in another meeting, but it's good to see you here as well. And Kim is here, but she's hiding behind a beautiful, I think that's a sunset. Yes, but she's probably here at some point. At some point, she'll wave and say, "There she is. Hi, Kim." Okay, good. Well, look, let me do a little bit of the framing here. Marina, is there anything you want to share with regard to anything at all? No, we're going. So this is the second in our official series. We had an inaugural session last year. And then in January, we had our first session with one of the instigating causalities. One of the people who started the Living Cities Earth initiative altogether is Marilyn Hamilton. And she shared with us some very interesting ideas around the Gaia's Code for Care and what it means to be part of a living, learning human hive. The Living Cities Earth framework is very much about learning as Marina reminded us in an earlier meeting today, lifelong, life-wide, and life-deep learning processes. So we are incredibly fortunate to have with us today Dr. Shae L. Brown. Keep forgetting what the L stands for. You want to share that?
That's my middle name, Linda.
Got it. All right, Shae L. And who we have been on several adventures together through cyberspace mainly, but in mainly exploring the parameters of the intersections between quantum physics and not only quantum physics, but the understanding of interconnectedness that comes from the sciences that explore not only the micro but at the macro, these dynamics of emergence, really what we understand as patterning, but Shae will explain that in greater depth. But what are these dynamics in the micro and in the macro that we see in the universe writ large? And what do we see and understand how these patterns are in our mundo, our world in between? And combining that understanding from the sciences with an understanding that comes from indigenous wisdom practices. Shae introduced me to the notion of post-disciplinary education. Right? I thought transdisciplinary education was the final step, but which is very systemic, brings together an emergent understanding of disciplinary perspectives. But Shae introduced a post-disciplinary frame to me, and that really enriched my understanding of how we can move then beyond Western conceptions of education. Very powerful. The intersection between that and what I mentioned earlier with the sciences of complexity and particularly from quantum physics and astrophysics, and then bringing this into a systems language that is based in what essentially is a pattern language, right? What is that pattern language? How is that useful to living on planet Earth today? And how is it useful for us to human well together? You know, the tagline for Living Cities Earth is humaning well together for aliveness with love. So learning that pattern language, which goes well beyond the kind of learning that is only in your head. And this, I think, is really what humans need to know in to meet today's challenges. Let's put it that way. And the dynamics of change. We talked last time briefly about living in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And for the psychologists among us, Robert Fisher, who's here, and others, it's also often expressed as rupt, that the world is not just volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, but it's felt and sensed to be rapid, unpredictable, paradoxical, and tangled. That's rupt. So how then do the pattern language and how do we learn for conviviality, not just with other humans, but in all worlds? So I'm going to now, I think I've done enough of a pre-mumble. We don't have, Pavel isn't yet here with us. I think he's, again, please excuse the fact that he's working his best he can. And I was just about to ask Marina to post about the recordings there, because Cynthia, you asked for them, and now they're in the chat. You can find the recordings of our previous sessions. They're perfect. See, this is where Marina does her job of mind reading, because again, I was just about to ask for that, and so thank you very much for sharing that, Marina. All right, I think without further ado, Shae, if you could do a moment also of self-introduction, because I didn't want to go and take that, but however you want to present yourself and your superpowers.
Oh, no pressure. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you today. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the country of the Widjabul Waiable people of the Bundjalung Nation here in the beautiful Northern Rivers of New South Wales, and dawn is just beginning to show, which is just beautiful and very apt. It's my favourite time of the day. I was born in England and came to Australia as a small child, and have lived in Sydney. I'm now a grandmother, and I'm currently working on playing and working and playing with this work that I'm going to share with you today. So I won't say much more about it because I'm going to share it with you. So really it's about what I'm sharing with you is my learning relationship with Gaia and how that relates to my contribution to transformational education. So as Alexander was describing, patterns to me are the language of life. And as I'm sure you're all aware, we see similar patterns across scales: spheres, toroidal flows, tree, mycelial patterns, spirals, and ellipses are seen at every scale. And Indigenous knowledges and science describe patterning as the dynamic processes of life's coming into being, all the way across scale from subatomic particles, which are little patterns of energy and information in the quantum field, all the way through to the enormous structures that we see in the cosmos. There's a vast mycelial patterning, which is described as BOSS, which is a very strange name, but there you go. And I read just this week, actually, some work in physics which describes patterning as the process of life's evolution that evolves through learning, and this relative stability and boundaries of patterns hold enough for different combinations to be tried and time enough for feedback. And so that enablement is held by patterning, by the affordances of patterning for further learning. So this is learning is becoming, learning is evolving, and learning is the process of existence and evolution through patterning. And I discovered that the language of patterning is also useful for human learning, and that's what I'm going to share with you today, my journey about what I've been doing with that, and for attuning our own becoming to this generative emergence. So my contribution to transformational education is through using a very simple patterns-based design of 4 ecological patterns that we see everywhere in life for human learning. And so far I've used it with secondary and university students. This is using patterns to think with for understanding ourselves as complex phenomena. Now, this contribution sparked into life when I began teaching in the government secondary school system, or high school system as it's known here in Australia. I realised straight away that the curriculum I was given to teach was like a little box with rigid boundaries and a linear progression of information and assessments going along, where my understanding of learning is that it happened in the everything else going on in the classroom, the school, the community, and all of life. It was happening, the learning was happening in the complexity of all relationships, the students' experience of who they are, the relationships happening in the room, communications, the flows and exchanges of energy, information, and meaning going on all around us. Now, interestingly, the curriculum and the Department of Education doesn't have anything to say about any of this. In fact, everything that is not curriculum, the students are told they're expected to leave at the door when they come into the room. And dealing with all of that dynamic is considered a class management or a discipline issue. It wasn't a discipline issue for me. I wanted to engage the students in that dynamic everything because that's where it was happening. I was also really quickly aware there were many students who were not very present. There was a level of disengagement and tuning out. Sentience was down and a bit dull, not as much aliveness in the room as I would like. So I thought about how to inspire the students to be present with me. I wanted them with me. I wanted them to be in relationship with me and each other. How to get them participating in this dynamic everything going on and in their own learning. Now, as a pattern thinker, I had used a set of simple patterns in design to give a visual language to my own embodied experience. I was using the patterns to think with and to express awareness and sentience with the world and with the cosmos. So even though it wasn't in the curriculum, I decided to experiment with my patterns design and introduced it to my students. I'm going to do a little experiment here. If you would come with me for a minute and imagine that you're a 13-year-old just beginning to start high school. I'm going to explain to you exactly how I introduce this to students rather than telling you about it in an abstract kind of way. So welcome to high school, everybody. The reason we are all here is to do with learning. We all know that. So let's think about learning for a moment. What actually is learning and how does it happen? We might think that learning only happens inside the brain. And yes, our brains are involved for sure, but that's not all. The Department of Education seems to think that learning is inside the curriculum. That information to be engaged and shown, to be memorised and assessed. Oh, look, the curriculum is useful, and some not so useful things. It gives me ideas of what we can look at, but you might be surprised to hear that learning isn't in the curriculum, and it isn't just in our brains either. Here's the thing. The learning happens in our engagement and experience with everything else outside of the curriculum, outside of our brains and bodies, as well as inside them. Imagine we are fish swimming in an ocean. The learning happens with the ocean, in our experience of swimming in that ocean. So what is this ocean of everything that we're swimming in, and what does it have to do with learning? Well, in this classroom, it's all of the stuff going on, the energy, the different forms of energy, or how we're feeling physically, emotionally, our thoughts, our attitudes. And I know you're told to leave everything at the door when you come in, but in here it's all welcome, all acknowledged, all accepted, and all respected. And the everything that we're swimming in and learning with includes the classroom itself, the furniture, the school, the environment, the trees, the grass, the sugarcane we can see through the windows, the birds, the animals, the weather, our families, our town, communities, our country, our planet, and the cosmos for those who like to relate to the universe. Our learning is happening in this ocean of everything, the flows of energy, information in us, around us, between us, and it all influences the brain aspect of learning. Now, I know there might be an idea that we have, and some people will tell you this too, that some people can learn easily and some people not so well. Well, here in my classroom, the true meaning of learning is going to be our way of doing things, our focus, because learning is what makes life alive. Learning is what all organisms do, from a single cell amoeba to the entire universe. It's all learning. Learning is how everything grows and lives. So if you're alive, you're learning. If you're breathing, you're learning. So it's impossible to not learn. It's just a matter of the everything going on, our experience. What is it supporting us to learn? The everything can help us with learning that is good and helps us and assists us in life, or it can help us with learning that doesn't help us so much. But one way or another, we are always learning. So how can we engage with this everything that we're swimming in to help ourselves learn? How do we even talk about everything and everyness? Well, there is a simple way that I've found using simple patterns, and I'm going to show them to you. You can have a look at them and you can let me know if you think they're useful or not for you, and if you'd like to adjust them or change them. And we can play with these and see how we go with this. Just something interesting to do. So that was how I introduced, come back out of being in my classes now. That was how I introduced pattern thinking to the students. And then the patterns were up on the board at all times as a post-disciplinary and quite transdisciplinary knowledge that was happening in the background, no matter what we were doing with the curriculum. So really what I was doing was beginning to generate the conditions for the class to operate as a complex learning phenomenon. So I introduced the 4 patterns to the young people, each of the 4 expressing a dimension of the everyness that I kept talking about. The design, as I said, was up on the board. It's like a meta-knowledge. At that time, it was called the patterns of human time because the dimension of time was central and foundational in the design. Now, with the patterns that I mentioned before, the design includes concentric spheres patterning, expressing spatial and discursive arenas, branching mycelial patterning, expressing relational connections, flows of meaning and energy and information, spiral patterning, expressing time as a complex phenomenon, and seed patterning, expressing death, transformation, legacy, and regeneration. And I also used a wide range of ecological metaphors and analogies. So this was teaching complexity thinking with no complexity language at all to young people, no new language, so very low cognitive load. which is really important because the curriculum is so packed these days and the Department of Education keeps adding more things. So something that is no new language that young people understand easily is incredibly important. Now, the design has complex attributes through the interconnectivity of the 4 patterns through internal segmenting and fractal levels. It was used for learning that was not for a pre-planned outcome, but for opening and stimulating possibilities, what Davis and Samara called the space of the possible, and what Nora Basin recently describes as aphanipoesis, which is a new version of poesis, which she describes as the gathering and the readiness that's immeasurable, that's happening before emergence, that enables emergence. I thought that was a very interesting term. So yeah, learning with patterning doesn't specify particular results because it's all about the students' relationships with themselves and their lives, which is really great because what has emerged in this work is far more than I could think up. So engaging with time, I'm going to talk a little bit about that now, was especially important and powerful with the students because what I observed, I don't know if any of you are teachers, but what I observed in my classroom as a new teacher became a central motivation for engaging the students with pattern thinking. And I observed some of the students, these beautiful young people, disengaged in a way that I realised was related to their experience of time in the education system and generally in Western culture. This 13 and 14-year-olds telling me that they were too far behind, had missed learning, were too late, would never catch up. It was like they were expressing being left behind in their own lives, being too late for life at 13. Now, I observed this having a really powerful effect, a shutdown effect on the consciousness of the students. So I engaged them with thinking about time differently through the spiral patterning. I explained to them that the educational process and success and progress in life is generally represented to us as a straight line. And if we just do the right thing, learn the right thing, we will move along this line like a train on a track and arrive at success. And if we don't arrive at success, we're told that it's our own silly fault. I told them that time in life doesn't actually go in a straight line. Time has many rhythms, like music. It goes slow sometimes, we go slow sometimes. Then life moves us into fast change and sometimes fast learning. And then sometimes everything just seems to dissolve away and everything might seem to be perfectly still, like a no-when for a while, nothing much moving. And then life moves again. This is human time as a lot of diverse rhythms, all at once, all influencing each other. Our many body time rhythms, family time, earth time, and of course, including the millions of rhythms of the species and elements in our ocean of everything, culture time, and the deep time influence of our ancestors alive now in our bones, in generational effects. And of course, all of the possibilities of our futures, all of it is a patterning of many rhythms that is human time. Now, this is true for everyone, that no one's life goes in a straight line. It might look like it from the outside, or if you're looking at their lives on Instagram, but that's not actually how it happens. Now, clocks are interesting. They give us the idea that time goes in a straight line, even though they go in a circle. But clock time is one rhythm, just one in the many. It's used for organising everything into this one clockwork way of going, into a sometimes machine-like standard way of going. And it was invented to be able to organise trains to run on time, to align time zones across the planet, and then for people, organising them to do things like going to school. But it's not a natural human time or an earth time or an everything time. And it's certainly not necessarily a learning time. Look, clock time is really useful. You can organise the time to have lunch with your friends. If you need to catch a plane, I absolutely love my watch. It helps me to organise myself, but it's not a measure of who we are. And it is not a measure of our learning. So we're not going to learn in linear time. I also asked my students this interesting question of when they thought, when I was asking them about their experience in relationship with time, when the peak of their life would be. And most of them agreed that 25 was the time that you had to arrive at success. Otherwise, you'd missed out and it was all downhill from there. I kid you not, that's what they told me. So we engaged with this youth worshipping linear pressure to be everything and to be amazing in the peak of youth while you're still growing, and tried to unhook them from that. So we used the multi-level spiral patterning to think about complex time, complex becoming, and unhooking them, as I said, from linear time. We also unhooked the future from being and this is really important, an automatic straight trajectory of one view of the past and one view of the present, opening up time and complexifying time. And later in my doctoral research, I came across the work of Michael Al-Hadeth-Jones, who explained perfectly what I'd been seeing with my students. And he explains that the reductive rigidity of linear time in education can create serious psychological distress, an experience of students being temporally displaced and dislocated in a temporal way from their own lives, which is what I was seeing with the students. And it's so subtle because they may seem all right, spatially and physically and in their health, but this is very subtle dislocation. And it's not understood either in the field of education or really in the field of psychology, because we take time for granted as just a linear backdrop. Now, this effect is what Michael Al-Hadeth-Jones calls chronophobia, which is an amorphous, free-floating terror of time running out. And this is what I was seeing with my young people. At 13, they were experiencing time running out. And of course, this is exacerbated by curriculum that includes a very linear perspective of the inevitability of destruction of life and Armageddon, based on this very reductive and linear idea of time as determined, which of course it's not. And linear time made universal is especially damaging for Indigenous students who are caught in Gregory Bateson's term, a double bind of being considered to exist in the past. And if they're here now, to be only relics of themselves, or if they're being modern, they have to leave their culture behind. So this temporal double bind, which can cause a kind of chronopsychosis, where people feel like they just disappear in time. And as I said before, it's so subtle that it's hard to observe sometimes. Now, with suicide being the leading cause of death amongst young Australians, complex time, engaging with complex time, really needs to be given attention in education, I feel. Because the optimism and the motivation that we need, that young people need to participate in the conditions for alternative futures, is grounded in an understanding and an embodied experience of time as a complex phenomenon. We can shift the idea of future to an open and co-creative possibility that both Indigenous knowledge and quantum field theory tells us it is, because there is no inevitable path. Time is participatory. So this is a complex view of time is a very, very important dimension of transformational education. My high school students and I used the patterns of human time for engaging with time in this way, and also more generally for engaging collaboratively with the complexity of the classroom culture together, with a shared patterning for the class and patternings of individual becoming as well. We used it to understand that we are each and all complex phenomena embedded and entangled within wider fields of phenomena. And also to learn about respect for relationships, communication and boundaries, because the young people were beginning to become very interested in each other. And it was also used in other ways related to the curriculum itself. So this is thinking with and within a deep complexity paradigm. It's not lessons about complexity as a topic or abstract knowledge. And as I said before, it can be taught with using no new language. So where did my own pattern understanding emerge? Where does this come from? As a 6-year-old, I was wandering along the lanes in the wood towards the woods in the countryside of England, visiting my favourite tree, as I often did. On this one occasion, the entire world all around me dissolved into patterns pixelated, moving patterns. My tree was a tree pattern in an ocean of patterns in every direction. The plants, the birds, the butterflies were all patterns of themselves, and I was a person-shaped pattern. A strong feature of this experience was that the patterns knew I was there and were happy about me being there. And from an adult view, I can say that I experienced patterning as conscious. Now, the strength of this feature was such that when I ran home, remember I was only 6, I agonized about not saying goodbye to the patterns in the polite way that was expected of a small child and English upbringing. I was very confused about the presence I had felt because I had no idea how to say anything to patterns. It seemed very confusing. So much later, raising my own children on a hilltop here in Bundjalung country, near the rim of an ancient volcanic caldera known as Wollumbin, I continued to learn the patterning language of the land, and it was there, living off grid, the design took full shape. And a clear understanding of my childhood experience emerged from relationship with country, as Indigenous people describe land with a capital C, to donate the intelligence, wisdom in the patterning of all elements in the myriad species and forms that we live with as kin. In the language of today, I came to understand patterning to be a language of the sentient earth. Now, moving on to a more recent past, the patterns of human time design was renamed complexity patterning during my doctoral research when I discovered connectivity with complexity science, Indigenous knowledge and quantum field theory, and when it was implemented with 4 cohorts of university students. With 2 cohorts of the students, we used complexity patterning to explore the dynamic phenomena of professional identity development. These were global sustainability students, and they were very interested in large-scale projects globally. And we used complexity patterning for understanding cultural competence, the complexities of the cultural interface and the relationships. And we also used it as a project design strategy. The 2 other cohorts of students, we used it to explore food production and distribution complexity, and generally looking at the challenges in science in the 21st century, which is, excuse the morning birds, which is a huge and complex topic. So this is implementation for complexity, sentience and cognition, for feeling and thinking with patterns, and to see phenomena-wide influences, relationships, effects and ramifications. And when we're looking at things that way, we can see what's left out, what's marginalised, what's ignored, our blind spots and our assumptions. And complexity patterning was also recently introduced to education undergraduate students as an approach to interdisciplinary learning, which was a little bit tight, but it was interesting to adapt it in that way, of how disciplines relate to each other and the complexity of real life learning. My challenge now is to write full curriculum for teachers and for students. Eventually, I would like to write curriculum for the entire range of ages, from K to 12, and for universities, and workshops for community groups and professional groups. It really is my experience as an educator that young people are already multidimensional thinkers. I would never be so arrogant as to say I was teaching them something, but it was giving them a language with which to think, with which to express, and with which to expand what they're already knowing and already feeling, using the range of patterns and the metaphors. And of course, complexity science terms and more advanced concepts can always be scaled in for more mature students. I'd love to teach this to science and engineering students at a higher level. Now, I think schools are like small cities. They have some similar qualities, diverse people being brought together, learning and becoming together, and using the patterning of the dynamics of the classroom, relationality to think with, using the patterning of the world to think with, to learn and evolve with, I believe is a transformational approach to education. I like to think that it forms a foundation for young people to use in whatever field that they're moving into in the future. A 2024 collaboration between the Club of Rome and the Work Environment Education Congress declared that the future of humanity depends on enabling everyone's capacity to learn. And this collaboration was sparked by the 45th anniversary of the Club of Rome report, No Limits to Learning, a report which inspired me in so many ways over so many years. In the opening address of this year's Congress, Mario Salomone shared, learning as a process is completely essential. And unlike material growth, which is finite on a finite planet, learning has no limits. And in Pavel's Next 100 Years report, he states that we have a crisis of complexity cognition, that we need to grow our capacity to engage with indeterminacy, change and emergence, as of course we can no longer rely on the certainty that we think we can create with ideas of linear progress and control. It really is time now to move away from mechanistic paradigm and into the relational deep complexity paradigm. And pattern understanding is shared language, a language shared between people and Gaia, is described by Australian Indigenous scholar Tyson Yunkaporta, who says that we can only think, communicate, feel and create to the limits of our relational patterning. Now, I would like to add, when I think about that, I would like to add the limits of our awareness and our sentience of our relational patterning. Now, Tyson shares that pattern understanding teaches us very well that there is absolutely no dichotomy between collective being and individual being, that they are co-generatively mutual. And complexity patterning is shown to be one contribution to expanding and deepening our relational patterning sentience. Thank you.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, Shae. Yeah. Oh, round of applause. Thank you so much. That's great. So this, just to set the stage here, so everyone knows the pattern that we've established thus far for the Learning Gaia talk series is this, that our guest will present a bit their story and what they're working on and what's alive in them. And then there's usually, again, I haven't heard back from Pavel, but my sense is he did send a message at the beginning saying he's dealing with a bit of a crisis. So my sense is he's had to continue with that. So apologies for him not being able to be with us right now, but that happens. We then would normally have a conversation with our guest, with Shae at this point, for another, about 20 minutes or so, just us. And then we will open the floor up for everyone to participate. And the idea is not so much it's certainly not an argument or a debate. Think about it in terms of learning the talk of Gaia. This is what is Gaia talk? And what is that relevant for us who are seeking to learn to live together, to human well together in dense environments like cities and with nature? All right. So that's going to be what we're doing. So give us a chance here to have a bit of that dialogue, just Shae and I, and then we'll open it up. I wanted just to check, Shae, you don't happen to come in a pocket version, because goodness gracious, I'd like to take you with me everywhere. No, but that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation. Goodness, I have a page of notes here. One thing that David put into the chat earlier on was if you could share the 4 patterns. I don't know if you have, and I'm sure that you could be given the screen sharing rights. And then if you happen to have those 4 patterns available, just so we can have a look at what you mean by those 4 patterns that you referred to in your talk, that I think would be helpful, just as a framing, and let us know whatever you want about those 4 patterns. I don't want to put you on the spot. If you didn't have that prepared and you don't have the 4 patterns, we don't need to move into that either. But yes, and then I have a series of questions for you. Would that be possible for you to share the? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And then David, you put something else in there about confirms the validity in the direction of Shae's transformative learning patterns research. Thank you so much for sharing here. We are co-creating, and this whole process exactly is our co-creating of our understanding together. Um, so while Shae is getting, Shae, whenever you're ready, you just share the screen.
Okay.
And then I have some, there we are. All right. What can you tell us about these?
The spheres pattern and the spiral pattern have 3 levels. If you can see on the spiral pattern, there's 7 phases, and each phase is also fractally divided internally with 7. And this works with 3 layers. So this is how time is complexified, that there can be many rhythms going on all at once. And the phases have qualities rather than simple measurements. And the qualities of the phases are related to the cycle of a fruiting tree and also the process of preserving, making preserves and seeding and as legacy for next generations of movement. And you can see the spheres. It's a bit tricky to see there, but there's 7 spheres, and all 7 are repeated inside each one on another level fractally. So you have different arenas of thinking or spatial arenas or discursive arenas influencing each other inside each other. So it's not flat 2-dimensionally. And young people who are involved in gaming and on computers have no trouble thinking this way. It's very, very easy for them. It seems to be their natural habitat. And the seed pattern doesn't have any internal differencing, because that's when all of the patterning dissolves at a bifurcation point or a transformation point, legacy moving on. And the tree mycelial patterning is the movement of energy, information, matter, and meaning inside the spheres pattern and through the spiral pattern. And I don't know if I can change this, but this is some examples. Oh, here we go. This is some examples of what the young people do with them. And this is just using 2 of the patterns. And as you can see, this is not modeling. This is not representational. It's creative. And what the young people do with it is creating their own knowledge. So in this way, decomplexity paradigm makes certain that the subjective, that the human is involved and inseparable from the complex phenomena that they're engaging with. So they can't leave themselves out and create an abstract knowledge, because this is their relationship with the phenomena that they're swimming in. Back to the everything of swimming, they're swimming in it. And this is an expression of not the phenomena out there, but their swimming experience as well. And of course, the minute you do these, the process of doing them can change it. And you might want to do another one because you've learned something and something's moved and changed. They're very dynamic. And when you're using them for identity development, this is really important with teenagers, because you can be really safe with disclosure, because they can code and pattern their information about themselves and their relationships and their lives in such a way that is not automatically available to anybody else. And if they want to share something through narrative, they can. And if they don't, then they don't have to. So you're not putting them on the spot. And it's of extreme importance with young people to do that. They're thinking. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, just well, Ian, I'm going to ask people to hold their questions until we move into the general discussion moment here. I have questions, and I get to ask you a few things here. Did want to say, let's put this down then for a moment and get back to our group here. We don't need to have this the sharing. The thing is that, I don't know if you saw for a moment that Cynthia held up also a very similar pattern for something that she, I think, also has. So she was showing us a little sort of mycelial radial disc. Do you have that still, Cindy? No, it was a drawing, but that's okay. So anyway, you held it up just as she was beginning the story. But that's interesting. So I remember you holding that, and you don't. Let's move on here. So this is about relational intelligence. This is, they talk about science, technology, engineering, and math, right? STEM. And then recently, kind of not that recently, it's already been about 10 or 20 years, they've been talking about making it into STEAM. So you're adding the arts and the arts writ large. So it's science, technology, engineering, the arts, which don't include just the visual arts, but inform all aspects of artistic expression from language to embodiment and movement. And then recently they've changed from STEAM, right? Science, technology, engineering, arts and math, to STREAM, science, technology, relational intelligence, engineering, arts, and math, right? So STREAM but it's so non-mainstream. The point is, STREAM education is really not mainstream, but this is where I think you are really making huge inroads here. And I'm wondering, before we get into specific questions, if you have a link to whatever you would like, Shae, a website or your work in any way that you'd like to share, if you could put that into the chat, if you have that ability, that would be great. I think others would be very interested in being able to see some of your work, or at least see some of more of your background and what you're up to. But let me ask a few questions, and then we'll open it up to everyone here. I'm wondering if you could just tell us, what is a pattern?
Sorry, I was just looking for those links. My understanding of patterns is that it's self-generating shapes, where from the subquantum field, where everything is quite amorphous and general, and then there's a movement, and it's a frequency-based movement, and that movement patterns itself into existence, and it's self-organizing. And as I said before, the pattern enables time, because once there's a pattern, something is held in a certain shape, which enables learning and enables becoming. And all subquantum particles are just patterns of energy, and the patterns of energy enable qualities to occur. And then those qualities become what a particle is, what an atom is, what a person is, are the qualities that are held by the patterning. Which is why when you think about things like acupuncture, seeks to influence the patterning of the energy in the body and getting it flowing to return the qualities of being to their best possible health. There's the patterns of energy flow and energy movement that are influencing the qualities of the experience of being. And as I said before, it has completely amazed me every time I find another one, but the same patterns exist across scale. And I certainly don't claim this is any kind of new knowledge. I've just repackaged it for Education for Today, because all Indigenous people use these same patterns. Western Indigenous knowledges too, all the way back. Celtic knowledges, all the same patterns, spirals. You find them in a myriad different forms, in different knowledges, because they are patterns of interface with the generative qualities of life, I think.
So is a pattern a thing?
Is it a thing? I think it's a thing. I think everything's a thing. I think thoughts are things. I think energy's a thing. I think everything's a thing.
So
I don't draw a line.
What's the difference between a thing and a process? Because again, a thing here's the thing. Whereas a flow, you can't hold the flow. It's ever changing. So I'm wondering if a pattern is more a thing or a flow in that sense.
Both. It's actually the interface, and it's what enables the relationship between thingness and flowness, because it has qualities of both. That's what they are.
Beautiful. I love that. Now, Kim is working a lot on awareness at work and things around awareness, and she may have things to share in a moment. But the what's the relationship between awareness and patterning and the learning about patterning?
What I've found with young people, that the longest amount of time that I was teaching this and engaging with this with young people was in my high school classrooms. And what I found with young people is to, first of all, create safety in the classroom, because people who are not feeling safe don't learn anything and don't have a lot of awareness, because their cognitive load is held in being wary. And I remember a long time ago reading a book called Too Scared to Learn, which impacted me hugely as an educator. So it's about creating the space of the possible, creating the space for safety, creating the space for young people or people of any sort to be present and have awareness, and not have their awareness held on whether they need to run out the door or whether someone's going to do something to them from behind, or, you need to create safety, and then allowing the conditions for awareness to be present, and making it fun, making it something that's available to everybody, making it something that is natural, that just occurs anyway, that they can't not learn because it just exists like breathing. So that enables awareness. And all of these things enable relaxation, which enables awareness, which drops cognitive load, which means that there's more presence available for any information. And I teach it, when I was teaching it with young people, I start with what they already know themselves, because teenagers are very, very interested in themselves and in each other and where they fit in life. So start with what they're interested in, which is where their awareness is, and then connect that to wider and wider fields of information. And I found you could be really ordinary and say, this happens in your everyday life. This is something that we all experience as everyday humans, and then connect it to something really big, patterning in the cosmos. And then they go, oh yeah, that's just normal. It's just, so you can stretch awareness in this kind of way, connect the everyday across scale, so that awareness, not now we're moving to something more important, but just connect what they actually experience in their embodied lives to other knowledge, which brings their awareness and their attention. But finding out what people are interested in and connecting patterning, teaching and learning, and complexity teaching and learning to the motivations enables awareness to be present, and then they focus, and then their learning is occurring.
Right. No, that's key. So I'm hearing a lot of the need for presence,
Yes.
to be present, to be able to have the space for the awareness, to engage in the patterning, and to embody and act to in flow. I don't know if that's a word, to inflow the patterning, but really to be inflowed by. That's beautiful. It seems to me almost as if the Western penchant for curriculum design, syllabus development, classroom engagement, all of this is packaging learning. It's all putting it into some kind of package, whether it's the curriculum, the syllabus, getting more, or even sitting in the classroom, having the hours, the time, the chronological engagement of the period in which you're studying. Is it possible really to package learning?
Well, education's in trouble. There's the refusal level, particularly in Australia, I'm not sure about, I think in America too, the refusal level of young people is skyrocketing. Classroom management is a problem. I think academic results are not getting any better. They're not not really getting better at all. And I think it's a major problem. I think education is in crisis.
So what needs to be done? Package learning. Then what needs to be done?
I think my own approach is to start with teachers, teach teachers that they need to be able to think in a post-disciplinary manner. Because what was really interesting is what I found as an educator is that a lot of the curriculum there's an interesting paradigm in education where the curriculum is taught in such a way that it can be taught as a bit of a game, and that if you manage to learn it and achieve, and it's presented in this competitive way, where really, if you break the curriculum down, what you want young people to learn is really easy to learn if you actually tell them how to learn it, if you scaffold it for them. It's really quite simple when the competitiveness is taken out of it and everybody is taught the skills. But if you're teaching something in the background, like complexity thinking, I use patterning thinking for young people, they have a reason to understand what their learning is actually for. And so it's moved from being an amorphous curriculum in space that they don't even know why they're learning it, to something that's connected to the patterning of their lives. And I found that the academic results in my class actually went up. So much so that I had a situation with a head teacher who called me in for a meeting and said, I don't know what you're doing in your classrooms, Miss Brown, but you're getting too much achievement and we can't have it because it's disturbing the correct sorting of the students and the way that we like things to go here. And you have to stop it. So I realized that I was onto something. I was disturbing this competitiveness for elite sorting of who can learn and who can't that was going on, which was when I decided, rightio, I need to go and put an academic foundation under this, and went back to university to get, to learn what I needed to learn to be able to talk about this in a much better way. So it's very interesting. I think it's needed. And I think having the opportunity to teach it to some young students already, there's a sense of relief. So I'm not interested in the Department of Education. They're a bit stuck and stuffy. I would like to teach young teachers, and teaching young teachers, give them the curriculum that they can then teach their young people when I'm teaching it. So they don't have to figure out a curriculum. Give them a curriculum, teach them how to teach the curriculum ground up. Because I was able to work within the system really quite successfully. So I think that's my contribution to work with teachers. And there's just, like I said, huge relief. I was like, oh, thank goodness, this is what we've been looking for. This is the piece that's missing. Oh, I've wanted this. You get that kind of relief from people.
That it's amazing, and I think you have to find that kind of sweet spot, the listening ability, because otherwise you're really speaking across paradigms. You're speaking to those who are saying you can't have this kind of results because people are learning too much in your classroom and you're not getting differentiation, which is a crazy thing for anyone to say, but it does fit in within the old paradigm. The paradigm requires us to have ranking and then to be able to compete, and et cetera, et cetera. So that whole paradigm is pretty dysfunctional. So being able to find this different way of being, this different way of learning, this is what you are working with, and you are finding also the people with whom, because there is a hunger and a thirst for this. So you're finding people who communicate this. There is a need. People sense this is off. It's not just the students, but the teachers, as you say yourself. So finding that in, and yet, the question is, how can this be brought into more engagement? So it's not the point engagement of individual students in individual classrooms or one-on-one connections with particular teachers, right? So, and this is where I think Living Cities Earth could also be a very interesting vehicle in a way, because what we're looking for is connecting 10,000 cities, right, in humaning well together. So how do we do that, but in ways that don't replicate this old, really the sicknesses of the disconnected, non-relational, particulate engagements. So this is not the connected engagements, but the individuals are the ones who are the ones celebrated in most educational systems. You're not seeing it to be part of a larger pattern. You're of a larger community, of an ecosystem of, and so you're given your degree, and then you are, all of that is very individual. So I think what I want to do is say one. Well, okay, I have one more generic question at the very end, but let me ask you one question and then my generic question, then we open it up and I'll have just about 20, 25 minutes for conversation here with everyone. Um, you say that time is not a measure of who we are. And you also say it is not a measure of learning. So that kind of begs the question, what is a measure of who we are?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, what I'm presenting to people through a patterning ontology, really, and a deep complexity paradigm, is that we are a patterning, and the salient configuration of that patterning in any one moment is a measure of who we are. And it can be an expression as an embodied being is a focal point of the expression of that patterning. What we are expressing through our body in any moment is the expression of that full patterning enacted through the physical, through the thingness of our arms and legs and our physical body. But we are actually, in fact, a patterning. And it's complex, of ancestors through deep time, possible futures, all of the beings that we live with. So much that's going on. And even the skin is not an absolute barrier. We live with more non-human cells in our bodies than we do human cells. And when I tell young people that, they all start screaming and running around the room. But it's true that we're already in relationship all the time. So patterning can express, to me, a measure of who we are. Now, it can become very repetitive and not very moving and not very dynamic. And then the patterning can calcify a little bit and we can get a little bit stuck and it can reduce a little bit. And of course, spiritual practices of one sort or another and physical practices are to crack that open and get us back out in the flow of the dynamic patterning and back in relationship again. And there are different things that different cultures and different practices have to enable us to move in and out with our patterning and to be more in the flow of relationship with that dynamic patterning across scale, depending on what different cultures or different practices do for that. There's a million, here's my words again, different ways of doing that. So I think that we're actually quite amorphous. We're an amorphous patterning. And one of the problems that I saw with young people is expecting young people to act as if they are rigid individuals when they don't experience themselves as such. They experience themselves as quite empathic, quite open, and experiencing lots of energy and lots of different things going on. And no one's talking about it. No one's allowed to talk about it because it's seen as pathology. But if you give young people a language and say, this is really normal, yes, we are related and interacting with everything across scale. And here's a simple way to describe it. And you could do this with 4-year-olds in terms of thinking about a tree. A tree is connected under the ground. Where does the tree begin and where does the mycelium end? You cannot find it. A tree is related to the sunlight. Where is the exchange, the absolute line of exchange? There isn't one. So teaching boundaries is actually quite fluid, and you need practices to take care of your boundaries and be aware of them and conscious of them. But I think patterning's a useful measure of who we are, but that's just my thinking patterns.
It's not surprising that you would say that, but I like it. I like it. It's very good. Listen, last thing, and then we'll open it up. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'll ask you this question, and then we'll take a moment of a pause. And Shae will be able to put her links into the chat because she can't both go find the links, put them into the chat, answer questions. So, okay, so we'll take that pause. You'll get a chance to put the links in there. And then we will move into the more general discussion. The last question, though, that I have for you is, Shae, what are you asking yourself now? What are the questions that are most alive in you?
I ask myself every day, what simple things do I need to do to enable my contribution? So, going back to Nora Bateson's beautiful new word, aphanipoesis, what can I do to create the conditions? Because I'm not controlling where this goes, because I don't know exactly where this is going to go, and what's the next step that's showing up, and I do the next step, and what do I need to do to create the conditions? So that's looking after my health, looking after my space to be able to write. What do I need to do to create the conditions? It's a preparation, very, very much so, and being willing to do things that I might think are outside my comfort zone, or not what I expected to be doing in any one moment, but absolutely just saying yes and going with things. So what can I do to enable the conditions for my own contribution? And that might be taking care of connection to my own ancestry knowledge and wisdom, and taking care of those relationships. It can be taking care of my relationships with my grandchildren. It can be weeding in my garden and growing some greens. It can be any number of those everyday beautiful things, engaging with the birds that like to come and visit me, as well as the more life admin things that us as adults we have to do. So creating the conditions, what do I need to do to create the conditions? How am I holding the conditions to do this work is probably the most important question I ask myself each day.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Thank you, Shae. So give you a chance to put those links in here. And as we transition now, you don't need to pay attention to here. But I wanted just to mention here that these flows of awareness, presence, relating, these are just words, but they are ingredients, if you will. This aphanipoesis of Nora Bateson, it's beautiful. It connects so beautifully to the work of another systems scientist, Robert Rosen, who writes about anticipatory system theory. He developed this whole area of anticipatory system theory, and saying that we are actually anticipatory systems. All living systems are anticipatory systems. What does that mean? In terms of always being, listening for and being already engaged in a dance or a conversation. It's as if you play music, you know what this is about, because you are always playing. Well, I'm playing the flute, right? So I have it over here. And if I'm reading the music, I'm reading ahead of where I actually am playing. So I'm anticipating in that sense. If you're driving a car, you're not looking at where the wheels are touching the road, right? That's the point of actual connection to the present. You're looking ahead, where you're going to be in a moment. If you're looking at where the wheels are, you're going to have an accident. You need to be looking ahead. So it's always being in this kind of engagement with what is emerging as it is emerging. But you're always in this kind of anticipatory frame. And this is the only way to explain, for example, how a spider's web came into being. Because a spider could not have prototyped a very small web to see if that worked, because you can't do that, right? It only works as a whole thing in relationship with the fly and other things. So again, anticipatory systems, I think, is a very interesting frame. And this goes with kind of, Shae, what I was hearing you say in terms of how am I being an anticipatory system? How am I engaging with, how am I in preparedness? How am I with this awareness, this presence, to be able to relate to that which is emerging? And this is, I think, so key to the Living Cities Earth orientation as well. Not sure what you would say about that, Marina, but this is, I think, a big part of what we are seeking to do, to be to be part of the dynamics of complex adaptive systems as they emerge. Shae, did you find your links?
Yes.
Okay, can you pop them into our chat?
Yep.
Okay. And then let's open this up now for, and what I think we'll do is, you just raise your hand. There's there's probably a larger group of people who are on the live stream who we are not able to see here, but those who are here, you have the privilege of being able to interact directly. Unless, Marina, you see questions from people on the live stream, if you could share them over here as well, that would be great. But in the meantime, let's go with what questions you might have. And Shae, I just want to make sure that you're okay with the flow. And were you able to, because if you can put them into the group chat, your links, then we can, then people here will be able to follow up and there you go. Okay, perfect. Okay, so there are a couple of interesting things that we have there. Perfect. Okay, for those who have interest. Who would like to, yes, David.
Could I quickly share a story? And firstly, the story involves this symbol here, which is it's a periwinkle, and which I picked up at the local beach during COVID. And this is an ironstone, which I also picked up on the beach. So we have the spiral and the seeds. And I used them in a presentation. And Uncle Bob at one of the presentation, who is an Indigenous person, said that he used to pick the ironstone up, which is about 20 million years old, and he used to crack the periwinkle to get the fruit of the meat out of the periwinkle. And when you were talking about those symbols, and I was excited and I drew them down, the relationship between those, within and between those two, the relationship they have, not just as a physical thing, but also, if you look very closely, you can see there's a pearlized shell structure, and the shell rubs against the rocks to reveal. But I also understand that the iron oxidization of that as a living system, that the life came from the oxidization in water with connection that created this shell. So this created that, which that relationship, which I find is truly amazing. I would just like to say, Shae, thank you for bringing your work into the world. It resonates with me deeply. To be able to see and sense the patterns. I walk around looking at patterns all the time. It's what I do. It's where I live. So I like to be expressing that when I connect with someone, I feel like I'm in a tribe, which creates a whole different thing, a sense of belonging, that you have tapped into something that resides in all of us, that it just needs to be revealed. And I think, thank you for bringing your work into the world.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think it's beautiful, beautiful story.
Who else? Yes, Robert. You're mutable. Robert, you are mutable. You're on mute.
Yes, sorry. I am already in an anticipation mode, what you mentioned, Alexander, because I train body psychotherapists. And listening to you, I was continuously imagining myself, how can I bring in this in my teaching? My own story, I was very happy that in primary school, the first teacher went in this direction. And in high school, my biology teacher. They teach me for life, not for school. And when you first made your speech, you did to the 13 years old, I went in my own remembrance of being 13, and I had a split reaction. One was, oh, I don't trust you. This cannot be true. And another side in me was saying, yes, this is true. But I cannot trust that you give me the opportunity to go with my inner reality, what my perception is. And my reality as a trainer for psychotherapists is that they are state approved. There are a lot of rules what they should do and should be able to do. And I have much more fun in teaching in the direction you were presenting to us now. Do you have any assumptions, any ideas how this process can go on? Because I'm still in the frame, in the old frame of the state.
I feel that teaching young people is the best opportunity, because I have found that coming at entire paradigms, coming at institutionalized knowledges can be quite difficult, can be banging your head up against a brick wall. So for whatever reason, life has placed me as an educator, and I love teenagers and I love being around them. They're so liminal, they're so open, they're so fluid in their being, even though they try really hard not to be, that I think that's the hope for the future. And also I will only say, I wouldn't generalize that. That's my own personal contribution. I bring one small piece to this question, and everybody has a different contribution. And my piece is to bring a contribution to young people and to the people who will teach young people. I would like to write workshops for professional groups and community groups, because I've done a couple with community educators and other community groups. So that could be really useful. I would, in response to something Alexander said, I think it needs to be, from this point on, I've done enough. I need to put the work in a form that it can be available to everybody, online, available out there. What I would love in my dearest imagination would be multidimensional videos, animations of the patterning, and I think that's coming. And I think that needs to happen to make this work available. I think people will look for it. My understanding is that people are, as Alexander said, they're hungry and they're looking, and that people will start to ask, what else can we do? I think young people in schools are very well aware, even though it might not be sharply conscious, they're very well aware that they're being given the same education as the people that cause the problems on the planet, which is why they're refusing and not wanting the education. They don't want to be taught the same old thing. Young people are really agitated about that. So I think they're really ready for something. And as I said before, I don't know exactly how this is going to unfold. My role is to stay as present as I can and do the work I need to do to disseminate this in the best possible way.
Thank you, Shae.
Thank you.
Kim, Cynthia, Marina.
I actually have two questions. One is really easy to ask, and if you don't have time to answer both of them, that's fine. So you're talking about 14-year-olds and also high school students, and you said that at least to begin with, you're not introducing any new language for the younger students, in trying to explain the nonlinear, all-encompassing, complex, deep existence we have. And so I was just curious about that, because I am among somebody here and a few others, and they're coming up with some really great language that is not, in any particular discipline, like whether it's, think, sense, doer, I mean, there are just, who I'm talking about. And so at some point, and I'm just wondering at what age, we do need a new language, because on this planet, we're not speaking exactly the same now, and we could be a little closer. in connecting with others. If, you know, and I think young people would like new language once they become just a little familiar with it. So anyways, that is the one question. And the other question, you said that, and forgive me because systems thinking patterns isn't my thing as far as, you know, in an intellectual educated world. Now, I know I'm living that. And if we talk, I know, oh, yeah. But anyways, so basically, you said patterns are self-organizing. Patterns are kind of like light. They're things and flow, energy, you know, so you have, you know, movement and flow, and they create qualities of being. So my question is, if those patterns are self-organizing, can you tie in just a little more? You have used the words, and I did see a little bit of your previous conversation, consciousness, sentience, presence. Can you tie those words in a little bit with what is creating the patterns? Is that something that the students ask you? Anyways, choose either one or neither, but, you know, thank you.
It's very interesting. I'll answer that question first, if I may, and then go back to the language question while that's fresh in my mind. As a complexity educator, I would offer students all of the different paradigms and perspectives of what's creating the patterns. And I would not give them one particular perspective, because it's especially in high schools, if you're with a particular focus group who have their own particular perspective on that, then sure, you can go with that a little bit. But I would give them religion's idea and ask them, how does that affect the flow of patterns in your life? What are the constraints and enablements of that perspective? What is the ancient Indigenous perspective? How does that influence what's available to you in the patterning? What are the enablements and constraints of that perspective? And I would give them lots of different viewpoints, and we would discuss them from a complexity viewpoint. And also that many, many different perspectives make up the world. And then just talk about what happens if different perspectives are attempting to constrain other perspectives and constrain the flow of other people's living in life. So I would teach it very broadly, because as an educator, it's really important you're not actually legally allowed to bring in one particular viewpoint. My own viewpoint is that consciousness is ubiquitous in the universe and it's completely involved. And I definitely as an educator hinted at various things, and, you know, had my students say to me, oh, Miss Brown, you're so weird, and just love that and encourage them to be weird in their own exploration, and just said to them, you can explore this yourself. Use patterns as a language to explore this yourself. So didn't ever, as an educator, give them one particular perspective on that, because it's very, very important not to, in a way, just to give them the patterns. And this is the answer to your first question. The patterns are the language. And we use the language of the metaphors of trees, of the wiggly lines of roots and branches. We can go outside, take 5-year-olds outside and look at trees. Are there any straight lines? Really, I mean, sure, some trunks are fairly straight, but the roots and the branches are not straight. And we can look at blood flow systems in the body. They're not straight, they're wiggly. So using very simple words like straight and wiggly and moving along, and all of those really simple analogies of ecological patterns for young people. So the patterns themselves become the language. The spheres, the branching, the spiraling, the phases, they become the language. And you can very easily, and when you're an educator, you experience a moment when the brains are open to another word, and you can introduce more complexity focused language like emergence, bifurcation. You can introduce those words at moments when you feel the readiness for the more technical terms. If I was engaging with engineering students, I might start there to impress them so they come with me. You know, it depends on your audience. So with young people, use very simple language that they understand. You know, the sunlight, the feeling of waves, the wind moving, just very, very simple ecological metaphors and analogies, which the brain actually thinks about complexity in terms of ecological metaphors. That's been shown in the literature that's naturally how we think. So it's very easy for young people to engage with that kind of language.
That's beautiful, Shae. And that brings
Thank
up
you.
something also that Robert was mentioning. I'm thinking actually in another meeting, but it's how language can be elusive, right? So we can have allusions to see when you speak in terms of poetry, or when you engage, you know, you do an interpretive dance rather than try to put into words, right? Or you do the wiggling of the trees because that's what they're doing. You know, you do that. That is also a way of embodying and then enacting and communicating and learning this language of relational intelligence. Kim, over to you. And I think we're about to wrap up. So, but do take your time.
Yeah, no, Shae, I just want to say thank you. So many things you said. I was like wishing my kids were here because, you know, always in relationship with everything and we're learning every moment. It's like such an exciting thing to, you know, realize that. And it's great that you're teaching kids and this is, you know, what comprises you and co-creating every moment. And you mentioned infinite possibilities, right, in every moment. So I'm just encouraged that you're with these kids and admire that you went back to school when you realized there was something you were doing that is bigger than what was just in your classroom. I loved what you said about time, and that you're talking about time with students and this different type of time, which is where maybe we can realize these patterns, right? Or see differently, and that you encourage that, and it's just a normal thing. So just great. Thank you for sharing all this with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a learning process for me to put my thoughts together. I learn more about my own material in doing this. So thank you for the opportunity. I, you know, like the Club of Rome Congress, and there are different things that I learn and realize in thinking about how to talk about it. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Shae, and thank you, Kim, for your observations and also for the gratitude. Very important. Marina, we are more or less at time, but I was hoping if you have anything to share or connections to Living Cities Earth.
I would like to say thank you for your presentation and for the beauty which you bring to the new understanding and new vision of the learning process and of the interconnectedness. And maybe we have a question. I would it's a couple of minutes for a question. I wanted to ask you, how do you think if a city is a living organism, as a living entity, as a living complex body, how could a human habitat, a city, learn with these patterns? What could be, as we imagine the whole city as a living being?
To engage with that with a group, I would use complexity patterning to create a visual representation, and I would start with the room and use all of the characteristics that you might find in a city, like diversity, different people, the way the energy's moving, things that are coming in and out from the outside, because it's not a closed system. Someone comes in the door, the electricity's coming in for the lights, things are going in and things are coming out, and there's flows of enablement and constraint, which includes the shape of the furniture that you're sitting in that might constrain you or enable you, the shape of the room, the materials in the room. You can include absolutely everything in creating a patterning representation of the room. And then you could use that as a learning example to then expand out and say, rightio, let's make one of the city. What is coming into the city? What's happening in the city? What are the spheres? And the spheres are not fixed. You can put whichever arenas you would like. Is it this corner and then these few streets? And then would you include the council? And then would you include the outer limits of the city? You can decide how you're going to build that knowledge. And then it shows you what you know. And then you can ask about what you don't know, what you've missed out, what's not seen, who are the marginalised, what is marginalised, and you can also bring that in. And the process of doing it, it's not about creating a representation or a model. It's about the learning that happens in the process of doing it, because people find out what they know and what their own relationship is with whatever it is. And you certainly could use the city as the phenomena of focus in a patterning process. I did it with a group of people where we're looking at a river area, and you would know this area, David, Brewarrina, and the fish traps. We were looking at who was actually responsible for the fish traps and all of the vested interests, all of the stakeholders, all of the physical laws, all of the council laws, all of the federal laws, all of the things that influence this particular area of the river, which was an Indigenous sacred site. So we mapped all of that, all of the people, all of the attitudes, all of the laws that actually are influencing what happens to each rock in the river. So the influence comes all the way in and flows all the way back out. So you can definitely do that, but I would always start with something really personal, your own sense of self, because once it's experienced as an embodied knowledge, it's much easier than starting with something that's apparently external. But you can definitely use it as a way of thinking about what a city is as a dynamic, as a flow of affordances and constraints and movement of energy and information and matter and meaning as well, all of those things moving around and having an effect. And then you could focus in on one part, okay, we're going to focus on this part and blow that up and do a patterning of just that particular aspect. And like a park, let's pick the park in this city and do a patterning of the park. And you could have lots of different ones, an overall one and lots of other focused in ones.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Great question.
You know, it is a great question, and it's a great way of zooming and also bringing our Zoom time here to a close. But you zoom in on things, then you zoom out, and all of these perspectival frames that different kind, again, it's not the same Zoom room that we're in, but this is a way of zooming. This is the fractal ontology that we live in, that's seeing the patterns of how they relate to our own being at different scales and different levels of being, really. So we are the small me, then we are we, and we are the city, and we are humanity, and we are life, and we are, you know, all of these different ways of saying who we are. It's beautiful. It brings us into a greater identity, this relational thinking and this patterning. So with that, Shae, thank you so much. I think everyone here and on the streaming as well has been expressing their gratitude. So we just stay connected. I'm going to then close. David, thank you for the request, and I'll be happy to close with a bit of flute, which is flow. You know, Joanna Macy said that a system is more a pattern than a thing. I like the way you related those two ideas of thingness and patterning. Beautiful as the interface. But thinking of this river music and all the things that David Bohm would talk about in terms of the holoflux and this flow. This is where we are, in that flow space. So with that, I will share a little bit of some breathing And please breathe with me in the flutes in gratitude to Shae and to everyone who has intervened today. Wait, do I have the right setting for my flute? No, I don't. That there now. Thank you. And thank you for being with us and for co-creating this living and learning Gaia talk. We'll see you next time, next month, for another Learning Gaia talk. Bye-bye then.